Good morning and welcome to all of our second Sunday service. I'm Linda Foss and it's good to see you. I will share this inspirational thought to begin. We give thanks for the beautiful voices of hope and devotion in the world, for every songbird, for every poet and mystic. May their love songs awaken the goodness within us all and inspire us in ways of kindness and generosity.
I'll also say welcome. Thank you, Linda, from Hawaii. Because I'd like to invite you in just a moment, as we often do, to begin with a meditation. But this meditation will be somewhat guided with a love song, in a way. What you're going to see is a contemporary expression of an ancient Japanese chant, which has traditionally been offered for the well-being of individuals who are suffering and also for the world. At the end of this, it's about 6 minutes long. At the end, the monk wrote a message. Translated in English, it says, "I'm praying for peaceful days coming back." An altogether important message, I think, these days. And all of the chant, which is going to be in ancient a version of Japanese or Chinese, and the temple that you'll see, Ukuji, which is in Kyoto, may seem, maybe foreign or unusual. As best you can, soften your need to understand the words and allow the sounds and images to just flow over you during this time, to let it flow through you maybe, so that we can meet this offering by offering ourselves fully to the moment.
Nam Karatano
My name is Michael Johnson, and I am extremely honored to introduce again our guest speaker today, Flint Sparks. Flint is a Zen teacher and former psychologist dedicated to assisting people in the unending path of growing up and waking up. He's an experienced therapist and master teacher who assists people in the skillful removal of blocks to love, both inside and outside. He's a clear and caring resource on the path to freedom from unnecessary suffering. And boy, couldn't we all use some more of that. Flint has nearly 4 decades of experience in the practice and teaching of psychotherapy. He's also a Zen teacher who leads retreats throughout North America and Europe. He is joining us today from his home very, very early in the morning in Hawaii. By the way, I know from a mutual friend that Flint's name is truly Flint Sparks, so given that he might shine brightly, and so he does. I give you Flint Sparks.
Thanks, Michael, and everyone who has endeavored to open this morning so beautifully. In just a moment, I'll show you some images, all of which are actually from this island, so you'll get to join me here. But first, I'd like to say that it's always interesting when you have something streaming and the imagery and the voice doesn't exactly match up. The sound was beautiful and perfect, but isn't that how it is? That our vision doesn't always match our hope. And that's part of what I want to speak about today. So if my trusty assistant would bring forward the first slide. This is the Open Hearts and Minds Fellowship, as you heard, and this chant that you just heard was called the Dai Hi Shin Dharani. Dai means great, and that word Shin means heart and mind. This great heart and mind is the place in which we open ourselves to the psychological maturity and development that's required for us to be mature human beings, where we grow up and spiritually waking up. I call that the double helix of maturity, the way we walk the path. Here we have a double rainbow, but it's that double helix that allows us to mature into our fullness, which is what most wisdom traditions guide us and invite us to do. One of the difficulties, I think, is how challenging stepping onto that path is. And we can see the next slide. You'll see that I love this wonderful quote from Eliot: "Humankind cannot bear very much reality." There's, of course, in the contemporary world, a painful aspect of that. But when we face our lives, and maybe on the one hand, like in this image, see the beautiful sun coming through in the morning, beginning to illuminate the landscape, in this case the seascape, and on the other side the rain clouds and storms, but right there in the middle there's an opening. And our spiritual path provides a portal for us to move through. But that requires us to face what we step into and all that we carry as we step through. A very well-known Tibetan teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, in the next slide, suggests that he said the spiritual path is walking between hope and despair, straight into the face of uncertainty. And I think most of us, of course, hope that our spiritual practice will turn despair into hope. We don't want to be caught in despair, but also there are ways in which our small, egoistic, grasping, terrified selves will grasp at a kind of a hope that's actually unwholesome, and it doesn't hold either. And so we have to face vulnerability. which is the way uncertainty feels in our body. We face the vulnerability of our shaky humanness, and the path that we're offered is a way to meet that shakiness. In the next slide, you'll see this question. If we have the courage to step onto a path, a transformational path, a wholesome path, then who or what do we meet? What are we going to encounter? And the question is answered quite quickly, and you'll see the image on the next slide. We're going to meet ourselves, and we're going to meet each other and the world in which we live. And hopefully at the heart of that meeting is something that is a guide. In this case, this image of a Buddha. Hopefully that's what can emerge between us, because what emerges between us in our practice, in our communities, in our shared experiences of walking the path, is where our growing up and waking up happens. It happens between us, not just in us. It's a relational function. But as you know, it can feel like kind of a mess when we meet each other, and certainly when we meet ourselves. That's my experience. And so we have to remember something really essential in the next slide, that everything belongs. This isn't, at least the path that I'm speaking about, is not a path of purification. It's not a path of fixing every wrong, because we come to our spiritual lives often with what we sometimes call the curative fantasy, that things will all be fixed. And we know that that's not actually true, because there are realities of what it means to live a human life that aren't a problem, it's just that they're difficult. Rilke famously said, and we'll look at the next slide, love and death are the great gifts that are given to us. Mostly they're passed on unopened. And this is the great matter, and we call it in Zen, of life and death, of love at the center of it. This image actually was taken in, all of these are my photographs. It was taken in the cemetery of Father Damien's church at Kalaupapa, the leper colony, which is only a few miles from where I'm living, although it's in an inaccessible place because these people were exiled. Our ability to love and be loved is probably the most essential call that we have. The fact that we know that we're going to die is something unique about us as humans. And these are actually gifts that are given to us that can propel us toward the path of growing up and waking up if we can meet them fully. But as the next slide suggests, we have this question, like, what's going to hold us? What will be sturdy enough and comforting enough, at least something that allows us to, I often say our spiritual practices won't make our life necessarily more pleasant all the time, but it will make it possible. Our practices and our shared community of practitioners helps our life move forward. And that's what holds us. And the essence of that holding is something that we call a vow. And a vow is something very different than a goal or an aspiration. A deep aspiration is something that propels us on a path. It's something that a deep internal request that calls us to something. And a goal is something we can meet, we can actually accomplish. A vow can't be accomplished. It can be lived and embodied, and is like the North Star, which I can see through my window right now. It's like a guiding principle that doesn't ever leave us if we don't leave it, and continues to guide us through our whole life. So vow is deeper. And like I said, isn't something that can be accomplished, but it's something that's lived. And in the Zen tradition, the archetype of a practitioner who is mature, who is waking up and growing up into the fullness of what it means to be a human being, is called a bodhisattva. That term, bodhisattva, bodhi means awake, being, sattva, being, an awakened being who realizes that we are inextricably linked. We're woven together. And that this weaving will hold us if we recognize it. But we're also in a world that's constantly changing, it's impermanent. And a bodhisattva vow is to assist others in that awakening, in that maturing. And in so doing, they're matured and they wake themselves. This only a shared activity. And so we have something we call the bodhisattva vow. In the next slide, you'll see the more classic way that it's often stated. There are various translations, but this is the one that we often use. And as I read these 4 sentences, or if you read them, you'll feel a certain quality which I want to speak about. We start with beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. And Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it. And so it's couched in Buddhist language. And before we even get into the specifics, you'll notice something right away that is quite obvious. They're impossible. You're going to free numberless beings. And if delusions are inexhaustible, how can you end them if they're inexhaustible? Dharma gates means those openings to step onto the path, possibilities for practice. If they're boundless, how are you going to enter every one of them? And if the way of the Buddha, or the way of awakening, is unsurpassable, how can you fully embody it in these impermanent, conditioned bodies? So this speaks to the impossibility of the vow, yet that's why we have to take a vow, is to call ourselves to it. I think we require it and somehow want it. So if our practice path is to meet each person in each place and offer the possibility that it might be turned a little bit more towards freedom. Beings are numberless. My vow is to free them. But maybe it's just a simple kindness, simple generosity, some sort of patience or compassion, some sense of ease that you offer just in a moment. We know that delusions can be, gosh, they don't ever seem to end because we are limited human beings that have these complex minds. But if our vow is to see clearly, to not be caught in delusion, and we see it around us in our world right now, the ease with which people can be caught in very painful and very destructive, even violent delusion. Opportunities for practice, Dharma gates, are boundless every moment. There's the 4 practice principles, which we sometimes chant in our tradition. There's a line that says, each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. We have the opportunities to learn every single moment. So Dharma gates, opportunities for awakening, are boundless. And I'd like to step into each one of them. Use that opportunity. And lastly, the way of awakening is unsurpassable. I want to embody it, take it on as actually the reality, not just have an idea. It's not philosophy or theology, but an embodied reality of living in the world. So these are my vows: to assist all beings, to have a clear enough mind that I'm not deluded, to use every opportunity to awaken along the path, and to embody this way of awakening so that I live that out in the world. At Appamada, the practice center in Austin, where Peg Syverson and I have developed the practice center, we've also shifted a little of the way that we voice the vow that you see in front of you that's often chanted 3 times. The second time we chant it, and if you go to the next slide, you'll see one of the things that we have changed. We changed the pronoun because we realize, as I said earlier, that awakening happens between. Beings are numberless. We together vow to free them. Our community of open hearts and minds, this kind of fellowship. Delusions are inexhaustible. We vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. We vow to walk together through them. Sometimes it requires the help and support of others to do that. Deep spiritual friendship. And Buddha's way is unsurpassable. We vow to embody it. And this embodiment of community, Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the great contemporary Buddhist teachers who just recently died, he said the next Buddha to come will be a Sangha. In other words, our community is liberating. So we together take up the practice path of freeing others. We together, as spiritual friends, take up the practice path of ending delusion. We support each other in that. We together take up the practice path of stepping through each challenge and turning it into an opportunity. And together we embody this way, which is generous and patient and kind. And then we take it not only from the personal to the relational to the universal. And in the next slide, the way that we state the final third recitation of the Bodhisattva vow is much more powerful. Beings are numberless. This vow frees them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. This vow ends them all. Dharma gates are boundless. This vow enters them all. And Buddha's way is unsurpassable. This vow embodies it. So this is the more transcendent way of speaking about what we are engaged in as we walk the spiritual path. That actually the vowing itself, the act of vowing, begins to initiate the liberation. That taking on the vow fully begins to open areas of delusion and views that are not clear. That our vows give us the energy to step through each Dharma gate. That even by making the vow, we're stepping through. And this vow is the embodiment of the Buddhist way. I vow to assist endless numbers of beings. Together we do that, and by that vow, beings are freed. I vow to help untangle the delusions that I carry. Together, we assist each other in that process, warm-heartedly and with forgiveness. And that process begins to end delusion in the world. If I vow to step through each Dharma gate, each opportunity, take every opportunity to learn and to grow, and we do that together, hand in hand, we walk together in a way that then at the end embodies this way of freedom. And so this vow embodies that path. So you can see this is quite powerful and can require a lot more than I'm just saying in a few minutes this morning. There are qualities that are important to remember, especially when you've spoken in this more transcendent way here at the end. In the next slide, we're reminded that this is a practice that grounds us on the earth, that is immanent, and yet it is free and transcendent and illuminating. So we both move into the earth and into our bodies and into everydayness. We're not trying to get out of anything. And yet we also don't deny the beauty and transcendent nature of who and what we are. And that capacity assists us in this never-ending path toward maturity, which I call growing up and waking up. I spent so many years as a psychotherapist, as we were just reflecting on earlier in the introduction, and worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 40 plus years who demonstrated an immense ability, a really inspiring ability to be insightful, reflective, and begin to transform their lives through that psychological work. But there are times in which that direction can be a bit enchanting, so that it's easy to get caught in an endless loop of self-identification, self-reflection, self-help, and not be able to step beyond that process. I've also spent the last 25 years or so in temples and monasteries, both as a student and as a teacher. And I see so many of my friends and people that I know understand the Dharma, teach it beautifully, express it in ways that are encouraging and inspiring. But if one doesn't have a way to understand what's going on psychologically, one can sit, and when all of your conditioning comes up, you might not know what to do with it. And I've seen this in many Dharma practitioners. And just to sit more in meditation doesn't help. But if you put these two things together, the capacity to deeply and effectively and wholesomely and skillfully work psychologically, and you have a spiritual path that opens you beyond just the self that you're attempting to improve on or help or free, maybe soften. Those two things together are the double helix of maturity, where we move into the ultimate aspect of what the spiritual path offers us. And in the last slide, what it offers us is being an ordinary, mature human being, a beautiful, alive person, not a god, not something that we will transcend. Our job is not to be free from the world, but to be free in it. To maybe have coffee with the Buddha in the morning and with each other. And in so doing, embody the vow that we've made to meet what we'd rather not meet sometimes, together to share the support and love and care that we can bring to each other to walk such a path, and to do it endlessly until such time as Ram Dass said, we walk each other home to the end of our lives. And that seems like a wholesome path, the path of growing up and waking up. And there are vows and practices to support that. So that's pretty much my sort of message and encouragement this morning, hoping that it's something that speaks to you and makes sense in your own practice. And I think we might have some time if you have questions that this might have brought forward. I'll be happy to meet you.
Thank you so much, Flint. And we do have time. Susan Powell, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Flint. That was very moving, and I don't know, I just feel warm and comfortable, and I appreciate that. Your message, it was beautiful, and it was clear, and it was inspiring. I have a question that may be way too big of a question for this kind of environment. If it is, just say, get a book, Susan. But one of the things that I've always loved about the beliefs that you're sharing is that my understanding is that it's really more of a philosophy, and that it can coexist with whatever your, say, spiritual or religious beliefs are. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily say it's just a philosophy. What I would say is that the Buddhist path is non-theistic. it doesn't address the issue of a higher power or not a higher power. And actually, I heard someone say one time, Buddhism is the most psychological religion, or the most religious psychology. Uh, so it is definitely a religion, but it also is not belief based. It's a practice path. There isn't anything to believe. There are things to do. And the
Mm.
Buddha said during his lifetime, don't believe what I tell you. Try it, do the practices, and see if it brings you the fruits that I'm suggesting that it might bring to you. Therefore, one of my senior Zen teachers was a Jesuit. Another of my senior teachers is Jewish. And so that's your point, I think,
Yeah.
is that since it's not a competitive belief-based system and it's non-theistic, these are, let's say, spiritual technologies which are available to anyone, but it isn't just technology. They're
Right.
a practice path which can be used to support and deepen maybe whatever religious, your home religion, let's say,
Yeah.
would be just fine. And maybe that's what you're pointing to.
It is, and please know that I certainly didn't mean to say just a philosophy. I hope I
Oh, no,
didn't
I
insult
get
you
it.
in that
Yeah.
way. Because I've always just been very drawn to it, and it's like back when I was in high school, I remember being drawn
Yeah.
to it, and trying to reconcile that as you will. You just gave me uh, some beautiful language with which to help share that with others, and I appreciate that. It was
Thanks,
wonderful.
Susan.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. And
And you
now
did that
Carol
without
Knight.
coughing. That was good.
Carol, please unmute.
Hi, I have a
Okay.
comment and a question.
Yes.
Years ago, my husband was in the hospital and he was dying. The doctor told me he had about an hour left to live. They needed to do emergency surgery and he was unlikely to survive that. Well, during that experience, he told me later what he was feeling was himself being held up by a woven sort of rope netting. And at each nexus was somebody he loved or who loved him who helped lift him up. And this is not the kind of person my husband is. He's not, but that's what he experienced, in addition to a smell that he recognized was, oh God, what's the fluid that's inside your woman's body when you're pregnant? What's that
Oh, the
fluid?
amniotic fluid.
That's it. Thank you. Because he's delivered a lot of babies, he smelled that smell, and that was the smell that he was smelling. And so I'm wondering if this, I saw a woven rope in one of your slides with a chain of a
Yes.
net. Is that a common image? Can you say more about that?
Well, I used it because I just like the image. It's a beautiful hammock attached to a palm tree.
Well, isn't it a
It's
little
the,
deeper than
but it's,
that?
but it, but it's evocative, isn't it? The
Yes.
wovenness and the holding is evocative. And the imagery that your husband spoke about is so gorgeous. I could feel tears come to my eyes just to think about when he would see in each nexus. There's an image in Buddhism called Indra's net.
Yes, I love that.
You know, in each of those nexus, there's the reflection of everything else. But in this case, as he was approaching the end of his life, he saw love everywhere. And that transcendent image of being carried and the immanent image, embodied image of amniotic fluid of where he came from and where he was going. It just seems like an
Oh,
amazing,
oh,
he didn't leave anything out.
no. I'll tell him that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Carolyn Flint. And Stephanie Seller, please unmute.
Hey, Flint.
What a joy to see you, Stephanie.
Oh, such a joy. Thank you. So I had a kind of an aha as you were speaking, especially about the we part of practice and how we do this together, in that I realized as I continue to care for my mother and her aging, and in hearing you repeat Ram Dass's quote, walking each other home, I realized this practice affords me and please correct me if I'm going about this wrong. It seems that this practice affords me the accompaniment as I walk my mother home. She is not walking with me per se, but there are others who are walking with me as I walk with her.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And why did it come to you? I think you've practiced long enough to know that, or have the experience maybe, of being supported by even beings that you don't even know.
Wildflower Run.
They were supported by all beings all the time. And
Yeah.
as we are the accompanier of someone who's walking, who my mother-in-law right now is in probably the last couple of months of her life. And she literally, of course, can no longer walk. She can't get out of bed. But to accompany her and to accompany Aaron, my husband, as we are with her, uh, I'm accompanying, but we're accompanying her, and there's no end to that accompaniment, like we see on the screen right now, and like you and I feel right now.
Hmm.
Sometimes we just have different roles.
Yeah, I just really appreciated that reminder and that help for me so that I don't get attached to why doesn't she recognize I'm with her? Why doesn't she, this? It's kind of like, that's okay. It's not about her knowing that I'm there. It's about me knowing that there are others there. And I so appreciated that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Beautifully said. That's a nice teaching. Thank you.
Thank you both, Stephanie and Flint. Nelda Admonson,
Yes, no,
where have you gone?
Hi, Flint.
she disappeared.
I'm here.
We
We have
see
her voice at least.
Okay. Good morning, Flint, or whatever time it is wherever you are. Thank you, as always. Every time you talk, it expands me and my knowledge and my knowing of connectedness with others. And just like Stephanie, I need a reminder this morning
Yeah.
about
Me
this
too.
about this practice. And the reminder I need has to do with interdependence and not to, and what our practice really is about. And it's not about the little I healing and growing and expanding, although it is, right? But it's really,
It's not solely about the little I.
so
It's to include this and everyone else.
so will you say more if you don't mind?
What's that?
I said, will you say more about that part of the practice, about the focus of the practice? Because I need that reminder this morning that it's,
Yeah, you've already noted it. Uh, when as we practice, as we do our meditations, or whatever other practices we do, we begin to realize that the that we're not alone. I don't mean just alone in terms of others, but we only exist because of everything else in the universe. That everything is interdependent. That net that we were talking about, and but we are part of that. It's not like I'm over here seeing the net. I am also one of those nodes on the net, and there's no way to separate myself from it. And therefore, to care for this is to care for that. To care for that is to care for. It's all one thing. And so, the vow has to be spoken as, I will care for myself. This is the body I was given. That's the great gift. But I will also care for you and receive your caring. It goes both ways. And that is in response to the vast care that makes my life possible. The air, the food, the people, everything that makes, I wouldn't even be alive if I wasn't supported by the entire universe. And so we realize from the most immanent to the most transcendent, the most mundane to the most sublime, this capacity to realize basically we're all in this together.
and in caring for myself, I'm actually caring for the cosmos, and the cosmos is constantly caring for me. Yes.
Yeah, there are ways in which we can focus in a way that is self-centered, which can be problematic, but true nourishment of ourself is also caring for all beings. So thanks for bringing that forward. That's an important distinction, an important question.
Thank you, Sparks and Nelda. And I'm afraid that is the end of the time that we have for Q&A. Grateful for everybody being here today. And now we're going to switch places so that Linda Foss can come up and talk.
Thank you all for being in our presence today. Flint, thank you for being with us and for your wise words. We are grateful as we set out on our paths. Let's take a bit of humor with us.
Okay, thank you for that humor, Linda. And again, Flint, I'm so grateful, so thankful for you to join us today. You know, given as early as it was, you just, set our day. We are the Open Minds and Hearts Fellowship, and we appreciate every single one of you for being here today and sharing that path with us. It was glorious to see all our familiar faces and then so many new faces today. We have monthly second Sunday services. Our next one is September 11th, and our theme is Renaissance of Wonder. So we're looking forward to that. And please know that all of you are welcome to join us. And also when we close, we have something that we try to keep our minds open and our hearts open. And we remind ourselves as we leave each other, we do what we call the love ritual. And we sign off with different love signals. And I'll show you in just a minute. But before we do that, we will end the service and you are welcome to stay. After the service, we do joys and concerns. And so people have an opportunity to share either or both with us. And then even after that, we stay for community chat, where it's just like a free for all. What do you want to talk about? So you're welcome to do that. If you need to go, we will sign you off. And thank you again for joining us. And if you'd like to stay, we would love to have you. Flint, thank you so much for today. Okay.
Quite welcome. Aloha.
Here we go. Heart, kisses, hugs. We're saying goodbye until the next time. Thank you very much.